friend of mine sent me a meme this morning that he found on Facebook or something, and I'm reluctant to even repeat it because of its implication. So with that qualification, it said basically, if people were shooting and killing billionaires at the same rate we shoot and kill school children, there would be no more billionaires in America in 2 months. Now, obviously, I'm not recommending that anybody shoot or kill a billionaire. That's my caveat. But the point, I think, is that if you look at what is truly terrorizing America, I have a couple of grandkids who are in elementary school, and they're having to go through active shooter drills, and they're having nightmares from this. I mean, they're being and I'm old enough to remember duck and cover from the 50s, but we never really took that seriously. For us, it was a joke. This is not a joke for these young people because they can watch the news. We have, and I realize that school shootings generally are not racially, ideologically motivated. Most of them are just suicides going out in a blaze of glory, but. Shouldn't we broaden our definitions of terrorism if we're going to look at the things that are truly terrorizing us?
So part of the problem is this concept of terrorism, and to a certain extent, all crime, all violent crime, terrorizes. You could certainly make the argument that sexual assault terrorizes women, and that we should prioritize those cases. And again, you look at the enforcement around that type of violence, and you have rape kits gathering dust on the shelves of crime labs across the country because it's not prioritized. So terrorism is a useful rhetorical term to describe the abhorrence of particular types of violence, but it's not very helpful when it's used as a term in the law because it is so highly politicized.
So how do we respond to that? How do we change our laws so that we can create systems of governance and policing that actually deal with real issues,
Exactly. You look at the recent violence, a school shooting in Wisconsin, a vehicle attack and shooting in New Orleans, the car bomb in Las Vegas. If we weren't, all the media and law enforcement tries to do is discern motive, right? And they. Often if it's a person of color or a Muslim, they find a Google search that justifies, this guy searched for ISIS, so therefore he's ISIS. Where if it's a white supremacist, they tend to downplay that information and say that the motive is unknown. We don't really know what the motive is.
Right. Or he was just angry.
Because it impacts their own beliefs, right? I'm a very conservative person in law enforcement. I see somebody with conservative beliefs like mine doing something bad. Well, it's not because of the beliefs, right? There's some other personal reason why that person did something wrong. What they need to do is not focus on the ideology, but focus on the methodology of violence. How is it that these people are getting such deadly weapons? Why is it that these people, typically what you see is groups that do serious harm have been involved in serious criminal activity or associated with people who have been involved in serious criminal activity. But if the FBI isn't collecting that domestic terrorism data, it doesn't have the data to connect the dots.
Right.
When a hate crime occurs in one state, it might be related to another racist murder that happened in another state, but that was categorized as not domestic terrorism or a civil rights violation.
Right.
As just regular crime.
We just have about maybe a little more than 2 minutes, I think, before we're going to hit a hard break here and have to wrap this up. You spent a couple of years, undercover and infiltrating these white supremacist groups. What is the state of play right now in America with these far-right militias and white supremacist groups?
They're still out there and they're still active. It's interesting that those activities don't get as much coverage in the news, and there's plenty of research demonstrating that. But I think the mistake people make is assuming that they're aligned with one of our mainstream political parties, and they aren't.
Yeah.
And they have
They're openly supportive of the GOP, generally speaking, are they not?
Certainly the GOP has exploited them as they have exploited the GOP.
Right.
That the dog whistle
So
politics.
like a mutual symbiosis.
Exactly, but it's a different area that they want to go into. And, I think what you'll see is some of the disappointment with the progress toward their goals, and a type of activity that really hasn't been seen in the United States in a while, where these groups are fighting amongst each other, these groups are fighting law enforcement. That's really one of my greatest frustrations over the last couple of years, is how law enforcement doesn't seem to recognize this is a threat to their fellow law enforcement officers.
Right. Well, that certainly happened 4 years ago today. To what extent? I hear a lot of rhetoric around this, and I've been hearing it forever. When I grew up in Michigan, and I actually had a friend whose father was in the Michigan militia, and he was convinced and he was in the John Birch Society, and he was convinced any day now, the revolution was going to start, and he was going to be killing people with his assault weapon. And that rhetoric of, we are the revolutionaries, we are the reinvention of the Confederacy, the South will rise again, we will rise again, we're going to take our country back, blah, 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 seems pretty vigorous out there. How much of a threat is that? Is there really a risk that people are going to start shooting at each other in America? We have just a minute left, I'm sorry.
Of course there's a risk. This is something that has been persistent in our society for quite some time. And when people in government or in positions of authority suggest that this type of violence is allowed in our society, it becomes more prevalent. And that's where I think we are right now, which is why we're starting to see more of this activity. And
these groups are growing, in your opinion?
It's hard to say if they're growing because nobody really takes an account of what they are. The government doesn't, so there's no official data on who they are. And when I was doing this work undercover, I never formally joined a group. A lot of the people who are militants within these groups see the different organizations as problematic, so they don't join. So it's impossible to count them.
Yeah, I totally get it. A fascinating book, Policing White Supremacy, The Enemy Within, the author Mike German. Rethink Intel at Blue Sky. Mike, thanks so much for dropping by today. Great talking with you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure.